Hello everyone, today we're reading Chapter 28, A Lost Election. In the presidential election of 1948, Democrats could count on winning in the South. No Southern state had voted for a Republican for president since before the Civil War. The South was known as the Solid South. It was solidly Democratic. Now, because of Truman's civil rights proposals, many Southern politicians were furious with their party. They weren't quite ready to turn to Republican, but they were certainly against Harry. So some formed another party. It was called the Dixiecrat Party. Other Democrats were unhappy with the president for different reasons. Some thought Truman was too hard on communism. They wanted the United States to try to get along with Joseph Stalin and the Soviet-controlled countries. Some wanted more domestic reforms. Those people formed another party. It was a new progressive party. When a candidate splits his own party in three, well, he is in trouble. In 1948, Harriet Truman and the Democrats were in trouble. Besides, the Democratic Party had been in power since 1932, so most people said they were ready for a change. Truman was nice enough, but after that giant of the war years, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman seemed almost embarrassing. Sometimes he just popped off and said whatever was on his mind. He wasn't dignified. He wasn't meant to be president, some people said. So everyone knew that Harry Truman didn't have a chance to get elected in 1948. Some Democrats tried to dump him. They wanted someone else as their candidate. But Harry S. Truman was stubborn. He was head of the party, and he was going to run for election. The Republicans chose Thomas E. Dewey as their candidate for president. Dewey was governor of New York. He was much younger than Truman, but he acted old and wise. He had a trim, compact build, dark hair, and a small, dark mustache. He was dignified. He didn't say much. He didn't campaign hard. He just began to act as if he were president, because everyone knew he would be soon. Franklin Roosevelt had used radio to talk to the American people. Truman wasn't a good speaker on the radio, but he was pretty good in person, especially when he spoke without a prepared speech and just said what he thought. So Harry Truman got on a train and began his campaign. In those days, most people traveled long distances by train. There weren't many big highways, and air travel was still a novelty and expensive. The president's train had bedrooms, a dining car, a car for newspaper reporters, a car for presidential aides, office space, and a wood-paneled sitting room for the president and his family. 16 cars in all. The train crossed the nation twice. When it pulled into a city or town or hamlet, the president stood on the back platform and spoke to anyone who came to the railroad station to hear him. Lots of people came. Wouldn't you go to hear a president? Truman liked to introduce his wife, Bess, and his daughter, Margaret, to those who appeared at the whistle stops. "Would you like to meet the boss?" he'd say before Bess appeared. Bess told her husband that if he called her the boss one more time, she'd get off the train. Sometimes Harry Truman gave his first speech before 6 in the morning. He was a farm boy and used to getting up early. He gave speeches all day long, 10 or 15 a day. Sometimes he got off the train for an outdoor rally. Usually there were flags and bunting and local politicians to share the platform. Sometimes high school bands played and marched, and the president gave a luncheon or dinner speech in a big city hall. It was exhausting to everyone except Harry Truman, who seemed to get more energetic and feisty as the campaign continued. Okay, we're going to go back and read the captions. So in this picture right here, President Truman casts his vote in the 1948 Democratic primary. That's the only picture on the left page. And then the top picture on the right page, First Lady Bess Truman, whom the president affectionately called the boss, and the lower picture, presidential candidate Harry Truman, his daughter Margaret, and wife Bess campaigned from the rear platform of a train in Bridgeport, Pennsylvania. His speeches were fighting speeches. He lashed out at the Republican Congress, which wasn't passing the laws he wanted, and he attacked those who asked for special government favors. He called them power lobbies and hi-hats. People cheered his spirit, even if they didn't seem impressed with him otherwise. "Give 'em hell, Harry," they said. Tom Dewey had a train too, but he didn't get up early, and he didn't give many speeches. He didn't need to. It was clear that he was going to win. Everyone said so. Newsweek magazine asked 50 leading journalists, people whose business it is to know politics, who would win. All 50 said that Truman would lose. One of Truman's aides bought the Newsweek and read it on the train. Not even one reporter gave the president a chance to win. The aide tried to hide the magazine, but Truman spotted it and read the article. "Don't worry," he said. "I know every one of those 50 fellows, and not one of them has enough sense to pound sand into a rat hole." The sensible New York Times conducted a survey. It sent reporters around the country for a whole month. The reporters concluded that 29 states would go to Dewey, 11 to Truman, and 4 to the Dixiecrats. The others were undecided. Every leading poll showed a Dewey landslide. On November 2nd, 1948, the American people voted. That evening, Dewey's supporters crowded into the ballroom of a New York hotel. They were there to celebrate. Men wore black tuxedos and women wore evening gowns. Each Republican woman was presented with an orchid as a victory corsage. Waiters carried trays of elegant food. In Washington, the Democrats hadn't even rented their usual hotel ballroom. They were short of money, and there was no point in wasting it. They had nothing to celebrate. Newspaper reporters wrote articles congratulating the new president on his victory. That way, they could go to bed as soon as the returns came in. At the Chicago Tribune, the morning's headline announcing Dewey's victory was set in type. As night arrived, the counting began. In this time before computers, vote counting was slower than it is today. Maybe it was habit, but many people stayed up to listen to their radios. They expected a quick decision. Election results were being broadcast on television for the first time, but most people didn't have television sets. Harry Truman didn't have one. He was staying at a small hotel. He ate a ham sandwich, drank a glass of buttermilk, and went to bed early. When it was announced that he had won in Massachusetts, one of his Secret Service men woke him with the news. "Stop worrying," said Truman, and went back to sleep. At midnight he woke up, turned on the radio, and listened as a deep-voiced radio commenter announced that although Truman had was a million votes ahead, they were just early votes. Dewey was sure to win. At 1:30 a.m., the Republican National Chairman said that it looked as if Dewey would win in New York State and would soon be President of the United States. The guests cheered. At 4 a.m., the Secret Service agents received a call from Democratic headquarters. Illinois had been put in Truman's win column. They couldn't resist waking their boss. "That's it," he said. "Now let's get back to sleep." At dawn, Truman got up. The deep-voiced radio announcer was saying that it was a very close election, but Dewey would win. By mid-morning, it was clear. All the experts were wrong. Truman was no accidental president. He had won the job on his own. The caption in red on the left page says, "Harry Truman had a hard time with Congress. That body approved his foreign aid plans, but turned down many of his domestic, home proposals. Some of those proposals for civil rights, national health insurance, and urban planning were far-sighted, but Congress did pass some important bills. One was called the GI Bill of Rights. It gave military veterans a chance for a free college education. It educated a generation of Americans, mostly men, and that helped create a broader and stronger middle class." The picture on the left page says, "Thomas E. Dewey accepts the Republican Party's nomination for the presidency." And the picture on the right, its caption says, "In one of the greatest gaffes in newspaper history, the Chicago Tribune went to press before the election results were in."